Global Conservation Corps presents the Rhino Man podcast. I'm John Jerko, your host, and one of the directors of Rhino Man the movie. This podcast series is a way for me to interview top conservationists on the topics of rhinos, the poaching crisis, the importance of rangers, and community engagement, all as a way to create awareness around these issues and to promote the coming release of our documentary film. In this episode, I'm talking with Dr. Johan Marais. Johan is a veterinarian and equine and wildlife surgeon. He was a senior lecturer in equine surgery for 20 years, and in 2019 was awarded the prestigious Spirit of the South African Equine Veterinary Association Award. Johan is also a photographer and the author of 2 books, Great Tuskers of Africa and In Search of Africa's Great Tuskers. In this conversation, we talk about Johan's journey to becoming a wildlife vet and what it took to start his own NGO, Saving the Survivors. We take a deep dive into his knowledge of rhino anatomy and the groundbreaking surgical procedures he's developed to save poached rhinos. And we discuss the psychological and emotional effects this prolonged war has had on all of those involved. This one starts out great and keeps getting better and better all the way to the end. So let's jump in. All right, Johan, welcome to the show. Really appreciate you coming on with us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Just for some context, we've been shooting this film Rhino Man for the last 6-7 years, and we're getting close to completing it. And back in 2016, Matt interviewed you around what you're doing with Saving the Survivors, and there was a rhino back then that you were working with, Hope, who I think she was on the international stage as this icon of what the issue is there and what you guys are doing with your work. And maybe just to kind of get going, could you fill us in on what the last 4 or 5 years have been like for you, just for Saving the Survivors, and how that's come along, and what the current situation is on the ground, especially with the rhinos?
To start off, John, our poaching issue started basically in 2008. And I was still employed by the Faculty of Veterinary Science, the university at that stage. And because I was a large animal surgeon, we got involved for the previous probably 10, 15 years and got called out to large animal problems, be it fractures or wounds or, anything to that effect. So when the poaching issue started in 2008, by 2009-10, we got called out to several rhino that's been poached either by gunshot wounds that we treated, or then that were where the horn was hacked off. And there, when the horn gets hacked off, I always talk about two injuries. The less severe injury, where they hack it off at the base of the horn, where the horn and the skin basically meets. So it's still a bad injury because your paranasal sinuses get exposed. But to me, that's a less severe injury. And then you get the ones, and the reason for the second one is there is or was the belief from some poachers that the horn continues underneath the skin, which we all know is untrue. It's not so. And because of that belief, they would, in some rhino, they would go and they would hack off probably the top quarter of a rhino's face. Now you can think, either they shoot those rhino, and I'll actually come back to that, but they were at the same time, they were also a gang operating in the Eastern Cape that got hold of veterinary drugs, and then they darted these animals. And the reason why they would do that is because it's silent. So you can dart it 100 meters from home and there's no gunshot wound. Nobody even knows. And within 5-6 minutes, the rhino is down. They would go hack off the horn and they would just, make off with it. The problem is that they never woke up these animals as well, okay, which is actually quite easy. If we go back to the Hope story, she was one of those cases, and then the horn was hacked off that severely. And when they phoned me, with that kind of a picture, I actually had a look at it, and I thought, but it's impossible. We just cannot help this animal. It's approximately a 50 by 30 centimeter wound, where all your well, your paranasal sinuses at the top where the hackle is actually gone, that whole piece of bone that lies in that area is gone. And your nasal passage is actually exposed, and your nasal septum as well. So I had a look at it, and I spoke to the vet at that time, which was Dr. Wolfolds, and I said to him, I just don't think we can help this animal. And he made a very good point at that stage. He said, well, okay, so if we're not going to try and help this animal, we're going to obviously put it out. So she's going to die anyhow. So by trying to help her, and it's a female, which is quite important, because if we have to choose between males and females, and it sounds a bit hard, but this is only true up to a certain stage, then we would rather spend money on a female because she can go back and breed, and she can have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 calves. So you're not saving one animal, you're actually saving 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 animals. And then, the offspring after that. Whereas we know in the wild, you need maybe one male for, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 females. So at that time, we really concentrated on rescuing females. And he made that very good point that we will lose her anyhow. And coming to think of it, probably 6, 7 months after that, I also realized that, because that was actually at that time becoming more common, we have no idea how to treat these animals. We don't have an idea of the anatomy. We don't have an idea of the physiology. We don't have an idea how to treat these massive wounds in them. We don't have an idea how to treat gunshot wounds. We don't know how to treat with antibiotics to treat them. We don't know which anti-inflammatories, which painkillers to give, because all of this research have never been performed. And it's never been performed because we have never been in this situation where you lose 300 and then 500 and then 800 and then 1,000 animals per year. I think we lost more than 1,000 animals in four or five consecutive years. So it was quite important at that time to fly down and to try and heal hope and to try and see, first of all, is it possible to actually treat this kind of an injury in a completely wild animal? Because that's the other challenge. If you treat a horse, for instance, you can actually put it in a stable. You can go to it every day. You can give it antibiotics every day. You can change the bandage every day. But in a wild animal, it's just not possible. So we can possibly immobilize or dart probably at max once or twice a week, which is already quite a lot. Because every time we immobilize her, we run the risk of losing her, or any other, rhino for that matter. So that was quite a big challenge. So, we started treating her, and she actually reacted amazingly well. And I just have to say that sorry, your wild animals heal exceptionally well. They handle infection and wounds exceptionally well up to a point. It almost appeared to me from all the surgeries and wounds that I've done over the last, let's say, 10, 15 years, that you just have to give them a little bit of a nudge in the right direction, and they seem to heal really well. And we actually did that with Hope, and she really taught us a huge amount on our failures in the beginning and how to eventually approach these wounds, because we had Rhino after her as well. What to do and what not to do. So that was really our focus in the beginning with Saving Survivors. Because Saving Survivors was basically started in 2012 in a response to all this poaching issue. We just realized that for an owner to spend, let's say, 300,000-400,000 rand to try and save a rhino like Hope, it's just not economically viable. He would rather put that animal down. But for me, it was really, really important to try and get funding for that, to see is it possible to save this rhino and to treat these wounds? Because if you for a moment go back or go across the big pond to the middle, not the Middle East, the East, where you have, 3 species of rhino. You have the Sumatran rhino, you have the Javan rhino, both of which there are less than 100 animals. And then you have the greater one-horned rhino, which I believe there's, I think, less than 3,000, 3,500. Now, you could say that 3,500 is a lot, but in the bigger scheme of things, it's not a lot. But if you go to your Sumatran or your Javan rhino and you think, gee, guys, there's less than 100 of them. So let's theoretically assume that you get 2 of those and you get these massive wounds in them. Are we just going to say, we as a human species, are we just going to say, oh, guys, you know what? There's 100 left. 2 has been poached. There they stand with these massive holes in their heads. It's 2% of the population. We don't know how to handle it, so just put them down. And if it goes down to 60 or to 50 animals, that's 4% of the population. Are we going to say the same? No, sorry, guys, we can't help you. And I think it was important to me personally to actually devise methods and to see, can we really heal these wounds? What does it take to heal these wounds in these animals? Not only these large, badly hacked off horn wounds, but also the less severe ones, and also the gunshot wounds, and also the fractures, because often they get fractures from the bullets, especially in their lower limbs. Do they heal, the same as horses? Do they not? We all assumed, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, that a rhino is just a large horse. And the reason why we assumed that is that their intestinal system is about 80-90%, the same as horse. So we assumed everything is like horse. So it's paranasal sinuses, it's anatomy of the front limb and the hind limb, it's intestinal system. Yes, we know its skin is massively thick on some areas. So, okay, that's a bit different. But all in all, we assumed as a veterinary discipline and doctors that a rhino is a large horse, and it's not. From all the research and all the info we've gathered over the last 5 to 8 years, we've clearly demonstrated that a rhino is not a big horse. It doesn't react the same to drugs. Its anatomy is unbelievably different with regards to the front and hind limb. And even the head anatomy, with your paranasal sinuses, are completely different than any other animal. So a rhino is actually one huge, incredibly put together animal, and it's almost a mix between a horse, a cow, a rhino, and a dinosaur. It's actually an unbelievable animal.
Yeah, and I want to jump into kind of how you got into this whole field. But before we do, while we're on the topic, I think it's maybe something that a lot of people don't think about as a veterinarian. All of these different animals that you're dealing with have different anatomies, and especially thinking about like a rhino, it's, you don't have that many opportunities, I'm guessing, while you're learning these skills to actually see a rhino's anatomy or perform on one, or probably a lot of animals, I imagine. But maybe you can speak a little bit more to that topic of, in your profession, as seeing these different wildlife, how you learn about them.
So we were fortunate enough to take some dead rhino limbs, and plus we took some heads, and we approached a private hospital, human hospital, nearby us, and we said, would you mind if we come and we CT, computer tomography, scan these limbs and heads at some stage? And they said, yeah, no problem. They said, but it's we start this patient 7:00 in the morning. cannot be here at that stage. He must be long gone by then. So you're welcome to come in, but you have to do it very early in the morning, which we did, and it was exceedingly interesting. If I can just focus, for instance, on the front limb, for instance, what we call the carpus or the knee joint, is unlike any other animal on this planet. It's in our research we've seen it's kind of similar to an extinct badger of North America. So how's it possible that you can have, such a iconic animal, and we were now 2022, I think we did that research in 2020. How's it possible, John, that only in 2020, after we've lost probably 7,000-8,000 rhinos since 2008, do we discover what the anatomy is of such an iconic animal? That's just flabbergasting to me. I always use the example of, when we put the Hubble telescope into space, that cost us $1 billion, but we don't have, let's say, $100,000 to actually do research on such an iconic species, which we're still losing hundreds of animals, per year. Anyhow, so it was really interesting to actually see how the anatomy differs, because we assumed, and even I assumed, that it will look probably the same as a horse, and we were really, really taken aback by how the anatomy differs in a rhino. We actually worked with two researchers at North Carolina State University. That also helped us quite a lot. But what we wanted to do is, yes, you can go sit and you can dissect every single muscle and ligament and bone and so on. But it's just, nowadays, it's just so easy to actually move that limb or that head through an MRI machine or even an ACT machine, and you get the software and you build a 3D model, and you can immediately see within a couple of seconds exactly how that anatomy looks. So that was pretty cool to do that. And we're still in the process of actually doing it. So this year or next year, we'll probably do the hind limb, and we'll finish the front limb as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, just how little we know about so many of these species that we have.
No, it's unbelievable. Eh? The other species I can understand, let's go to buffalo and sable and so on, it's not, and if I say high value species, I don't mean it, derogatory. I mean, they're not endangered. And, people can say, well, maybe rhino currently is not endangered. But if you look at your black rhino, for instance, I was born in 1968. In that year in Africa, there were 70,000 black rhino on the African continent. Now we're lucky if we have 5,000. So it is a very endangered animal. If you go to white rhino, we should be in the area of 25,000 rhino, and we're not. We probably, and it's not scientifically backed, but we probably in the area of between 10 and 12,000. And we still need, and the big thing is we still decreasing every single year. We can talk a little bit later about the stats of Kruger National Park, but it's exceedingly worrying to see that after 13 years of this poaching issue, that we haven't scratched the surface. We haven't got the silver bullet that says you do A or B and we will stop the poaching. We are still declining in numbers in both black and white rhino.
Yeah, I definitely want to dive into all of that with you. But before we get too far along, let's go back to when you first decided that you wanted to get into this area of work. Was this always a passion from a young kid? Did it start out more the conservation side, or did you always want to be a vet? Can you kind of go back to, what was it like growing up, and where did you come across this passion?
Yeah, John, I partly grew up in Tuskers National Park, which is a park in the northern part of Namibia. And the reason why we were living in a small little camp called Ukukuyu was that my father was a game ranger there. Mm. And I clearly remember him looking after black rhino and bomas. I know that I rode on a rhino. I can't remember if it was a black or white rhino. It was obviously an orphan that was tame eventually. I remember one day he brought, I think, 4 lion cubs home because the mother died, and we actually gave them all bottles. And I think at the age of 8, he actually asked me, so, you know what, in primary school, a couple of years, and then you're going to go to high school. So what do you want to be? And I said, well, I want to be like you. I love what you do. And I see what you do. And he said, yeah, it has its perks being a game ranger, but, maybe the money is not so good. So maybe you can just, choose something similar, but that makes a little bit more money. So obviously, the next thing was to be veterinarian. I applied for veterinary science, got in, and I did want to become a wildlife veterinarian. I qualified in 1991. And in 1991, the wildlife industry in South Africa was not booming. It was just, people hunting. So the private wildlife industry was not really, there was not much to write home about.
So a lot of people weren't coming and going on like field guided trips or anything like that?
No, not really. If we did get tourists, they would go to places like Kruger National Park and those places, but your private game reserves were going, but it wasn't, your game didn't have a high value. So there weren't a lot of wildlife opportunities as a veterinarian. And the ones that were there were really in your national parks. And those were such, sought after jobs that those guys just stayed there. They did not resign.
Yeah.
So I had to look at it and I went, okay, maybe later. I'll obviously have to do something else now. And I love dogs. It's one big love of mine. I became basically a dog vet. And that didn't last long because I think I get too emotionally attached to, my patients. So just after 3 or 4 years, I saw this is not going to run. So I have to get out of this.
Do you have any dogs yourself right now?
Oh, yeah, I have 4 Jack Russells.
Oh, awesome.
So then I decided to become an equine vet. And it's not that I don't like equines, but I can keep my distance. I can treat a horse, and it's not like I'm completely emotionally, detached. I don't think any veterinarian can be like that, but I can detach myself, from a horse and just treat it and walk away. And I've been a horse vet ever since, until probably 15, 20 years ago when the wildlife industry really boomed in South Africa. Not always for the right reasons. Part of it, a big part of it was, your buffalo, your sable, your roan got very expensive, which is probably a good thing. But what was not a good thing is we got these, and we call them exotic species. They're not exotic in the South African sense of the word, but for instance, where we get a normal wildebeest with a kind of a grayish color, and now you got a yellow wildebeest, which they call the golden wildebeest.
Yeah.
And let's say a normal wildebeest price was 12,000 Rand, for instance, or 15,000 Rand, $1,000. Now you suddenly paid 3 million Rand.
Wow.
For a golden wildebeest, which was actually kind of absurd, because we always said, what is the end result of this exotic game? Because you had golden wildebeest, you had king wildebeest, you had coffee springbok. You had kind of a purplish, not purple, but a dark purplish color, Gemsbok. You had black Springbok, completely black.
Was this all a result of breeding or how?
You actually get these recessive genes, and then people started breeding them. Of course, they were different looking. And then I don't know for what reason, but other people said, "Oh, we also want," and then more people said, "Oh, we also want some of them," and then they got international hunters to go and come in and hunt them at massive prices, and that just fueled the whole thing, and it just went on and on. I remember clearly I worked on what they called a saddleback impala. You can now probably hunt an impala for, let's say, 1,000 Rand, probably for meat. I worked on a saddleback impala that one of the golfers bought for 6 million Rand.
Wow.
Which is absolutely ludicrous. Anyhow, this whole thing imploded around about 2016, 17, which I think is a good thing. And it brought all the prices down. And now, you still have good prices for game, but that is how it should be, like for, just certain game, maybe a very good buffalo, roan, sable, those kind of species still have good prices, but it's not this exorbitant prices which we had back in 2016. So, sorry to come back to your question. So when all of this happened, obviously, if you pay 6 million Rand, for an impala, and it has a small wound or it gets a fracture, then you go, well, you must fix it. You must fix it. I paid a lot of money for this animal. So we got really busy at the faculty treating wounds, treating hernias, treating fractures, especially fractures in wildebeest, impala, and Nyala. And I kind of actually got exposed to a lot of the wildlife industry during that time. And then, of course, just after 2008, about 2010, 2011, the rhino poaching, I got involved with then because it's a love of mine. I'm a large animal surgeon. So it's just almost automatic that you would go from a horse surgery into a wildebeest surgery or into a rhino surgery, because you have the same kind of challenges in all large animals. Whereas, the small animal, surgeons can theoretically also do that, with all due respect, but we do face, other challenges just because of the size of the animal. And, because we work already with horses, we're just more practiced to deal with these larger animals, basically elephant, and all those kind of species, giraffe. So it was just like a generic move over to those animals. So I got really involved with that quite a lot. And then at 2016, it became so busy with saving survivors that I had to make a call and say, right, guys, either I must cut off saving survivors, stop it, and stay at the faculty and really focus on horses, or I must do the other side and really gravitate towards, saving endangered wildlife operations on rhino, buffalo, roan, and sable, and so on. And of course, because that's quite a big love of mine, I naturally gravitated towards that. So I left the faculty in 2016, and what's that? 2022. That's 5 years ago. Here we are.
At the time, did that feel like a pretty big risk to take?
Oh yeah, it was a massive risk. I was 20 years at the faculty, and it's a very secure environment. So you can sit there and you can do basically nothing if you want to for a month, and you still get paid. Whereas now you have to leave. You have to go into an NPO or NGO, where you never know in 4, 5, or 6 months, will there be funding to cover your salary, to cover drugs, to cover equipment. So it was a bit of a nervous move of mine, I must say, but I think we've been blessed and it's going well.
Yeah. Yeah, you just kind of followed your heart on that one, it sounds like.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Somebody once said to me, when you lie on your deathbed one day, it's not so much, the stuff that you did do that you are happy about. It's the stuff that you didn't do that you think, I should have done that one thing, or I should have just left the faculty, or I should have gone to Kenya. And even if it doesn't work out, at least you've done it, and you can go, well, I've done it. It was great, or it wasn't that great, and let's go back here or there. So no, I think it worked out really well.
Yeah, it sounds like you've definitely gone full circle from those conversations with your dad as a game ranger all the way to working out there now with the rhinos and all this wildlife. So,
and it's great. I really love it. Well, and it's not that it's a lot of the wildlife vets also see it this way. It's a privilege, John. It's really a huge privilege to work with African wildlife.
Yeah. How has COVID been with all, you were just kind of talking about, the fundraising and everything like that, and what it takes to be a nonprofit. How has this been, 2020 through now, for you guys?
The one thing, good thing about COVID was the poaching really decreased a lot during COVID because people were not allowed to travel. Because I think we went into stage 5 lockdown, so then nobody was allowed on the roads, and I think only with lockdown 3, I think the normal people were allowed. But under lockdown 5 and 4, you had to have a permit with you that said you're an essential service, and then you can travel. So obviously, the poachers weren't allowed to move around. So we saw a drastic fall in poaching, which was brilliant. But I think with regards to NGOs, I think it definitely did hurt us. We definitely got less funding during those years. I didn't stop completely. We had a couple of good supporters, so that went quite well. But I think there's quite, a number of NGOs, I think, got injured by COVID. I think we kind of through it now. I think the whole world is, sick and tired of all the masking and all the rules and regulations. And I think we all just want to go back to our normal lives and travel and, hug each other and, be normal. So I think slowly but surely, things are looking up and surely from a financial viewpoint, it also is looking much better.
That's good to hear. Can you go back to the beginnings of Saving the Survivors a bit, and how exactly did that come about? What was the inspiration? Do you remember kind of the moment where you're like, I need to start my own thing?
Yeah, I and again, it wasn't really me. I had a look at this, and I went to, we treated a couple of these rhino. Well, I was at the faculty, and because you're at the university, you have to build these people. And I saw that they were, especially the private rhino owners, were really struggling. And, they're still struggling because there's just no incentive to have rhino anymore. It's a huge risk to your personal life and to the rhino's life. In times of drought, you have to, fork out money to feed them. You have to fork out quite a lot of money for your anti-poaching units. And there's just no return on investment. So when we treated these rhino, I quickly realized that if we're not going to get funding to actually treat these rhino, then probably the 4th or the 5th or the 6th guy that I'm going to go to is going to say, listen, if it's going to cost me any money, I'm actually just going to put this rhino down. And again, like I say, if it's a bull, it's probably okay. Although as your numbers go down, the bulls also become quite important. But if it's a female man that, that can go on and have more calves, even if she's maimed or injured, if she can have more calves, there's just no way, that I had to look at this animal that we just cannot lose this animal. maybe back in 2012, John, that was maybe not so important theoretically. But for instance, now it's massively important currently that we save every single rhino and that we put as many rhino little feet on the ground as we can. It's becoming exceptionally important. I cannot stress that enough. So I had a look at it, and the only way to do that was to start an NGO. And I went to see an Indian guy that is a good friend of mine, that's in the meantime emigrated to Australia. And I said to him, listen, I don't know if this is a bad or good idea. I want to save rhino and probably eventually other endangered wildlife. What do you think? And he said, well, I'm involved in a cancer NGO, and it's working like A, B, and C. You have to put these things in place. Obviously, you have to get funding. You have to get equipment. And I said to him, well, I just have no idea how to do this. I've been an employee for the last 20 years at the university. That's my frame of reference. And he said, I'll help you. And this guy helped me tremendously. He even came up with a name because I said one day to him, I just don't know what to call this. And he said, Johan, what do you want to do? Tell me what you want to do. And I said to him, I want to save the rhino survivors. And he said, well, that's easy. Just call it Saving the Survivors. And I said, okay, well, brilliant. Let's call it that. So he was really, almost God sent to me. And he helped me quite a lot, pointed me in the right direction. And eventually, we needed as like seeding money to start this organization, to buy a vehicle. Of course, I was still at the university then, so we didn't need any salaries covered. But to buy a vehicle, an X-ray machine, ultrasound machine, and all the equipment, we needed about 3.5 million rand. It's quite a lot of money for here in South Africa. And we flew to Dubai, and we went and spoke to the large airway company called Donata. And they actually went into a memorandum of agreement with us and the university to say, okay, guys, we will give you the 3.5 million rand as long as you guys then treat rhino, which we were doing, and then the university must insure the equipment. And that's how the whole Saving the Survivors, started.
Well, yeah, it just all kind of fell into place.
Yeah, it did that.
It's amazing. Can you go into a little more description about what it is you guys do and what you guys are building towards as Saving the Survivors?
I think over the last 8 to 10 years, we've been doing a lot of fire brigade work, which is really treating injured, endangered wildlife. In the beginning, we really concentrated on rhino, either black and white. And then we saw, when we got phoned for instance, cheetah or wild dog or lion, initially I said, yeah, we really just do rhino. And then, the director said, but why would we do that? Surely Saving the Survivors means, survivors of all species, whether it is a buffalo or a Nyala, which is not endangered at all. Surely we can save every single wildlife there is, even if it's a pangolin or a bird or something. And we then made that decision that we would do all wildlife. We would, however, concentrate on the endangered wildlife like rhino, elephant, wild dog, cheetah, and those kind of species, whether they got snared, whether they got gunshot wounds, whether they were injured by another animal. Recently I went to treat a rhino in one of the provinces that were badly injured by an elephant bull. So any kind of injury we would treat in any endangered animal. We would also do non-endangered animals, for instance, let's say buffalo or Nyala. But how we do it then there is, for those species, we would actually ask a fee to actually go out and treat it. And, that fee means it will cover our expenses, but we would put extra on that to make money. And that money would then cross-subsidize the endangered wildlife again. So for all endangered wildlife, we do not ask any money, because that's why we get funded.
Yeah.
But for the non-endangered, like, tomorrow I'm actually going to a buffalo again. So I send him a estimated cost of what it will cost him.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll treat the animal, he will pay us, and that will just go into the big pot again, and that will help fund then black rhino, white rhino, or the lion, or cheetah, whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. A little more stable, extra income.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have other vets that are also working under Saving Survivors?
Yes, so initially we had one vet that joined us from Mozambique. He was Portuguese. He was called João. And then we said to him, it's quite important to actually bring in local across and to teach them as well to build capacity, a local capacity. Mozambique, for instance, is a massive country with lots of wildlife. And a lot of this wildlife, unfortunately or fortunately, is outside of your national park. So that means there's a lot of human elephant, but a lot of human animal conflict. All right. So we spend quite a lot of effort and time and money building up a Saving the Survivors Mozambique, probably over 4 years, to get it a really strong entity. And then they felt, they were really strong enough with vehicles, equipment, drugs, and with the grants that they can actually go on their own, which they went on last year. Okay. So that was really good. So they're doing very, very good work in Mozambique. Currently, it's only me, but we're in the process of appointing another veterinarian, which is a wildlife veterinarian as well, which will again increase our footprint both locally in South Africa, but also in East Africa, especially. And we will probably, as the year goes along, probably look at other initiatives as well, where we can bring people on board again, almost like in Mozambique, to enlarge our footprint. So what I wanted to say to you as well. So we've also decided probably a year and a half ago that, as I said, we will always do the fire brigade work. So there will always be injured and endangered wildlife that needs to be treated, whether they get injured by other animals, by snares, by gunshot wounds, whatever. But we are moving, and we've done that quite a lot with Mozambique, into a conservation, call it a conservation effect, where we will support and get involved in your larger conservation schemes. So be it either locally, where we would support, let's say, a large property with 300 white rhino and 100 black rhino, to make sure that we look after those animals, that we get little rhino feet on the ground, that we collar them, that we notch their ears, that we monitor them, and also then in East Africa, because I think that, that will actually give us quite a larger footprint in the conservation sphere of looking after a larger amount of animals, instead of only treating one animal here, one animal there, one buffalo there, one giraffe here. I think that's probably in the longer run, it's more sustainable as well.
Yeah.
And you have a bigger effect as well, basically.
Yeah, it's a little more proactive than reactive, I guess, almost.
Yes, absolutely. So that was the big thing. So one of our directors came to me and said, we are very reactive. I think it's time that we become proactive, about a year and a half ago. And then, that's when we realized, okay, maybe we should actually get involved in these larger conservation schemes as well.
Can you go into, kind of going back to the rhinos, what it takes, or what that process is like when you first hear about a rhino that's been poached and is still alive? You kind of talked through it a little bit with Hope, but what's that from your perspective when you get that first call? Can you kind of walk us through that whole process?
For me, it's quite important, when a guy now phones us, and it's either the owner or it will be the attending veterinarian at that property that would phone and go, okay, guys, we have an injured rhino here. So I think over the last 10, 12 years, we've, not 100%, but I think to a large extent, we've realized what we can treat and what we can't treat. That's not to say that we won't try if we think, the animal might not make it, but we more or less have a very good idea now. If a guy phones me and he says, I've got a humerus fracture, which is an upper limb fracture in an adult rhino, it's just not treatable. It's just because of the weight of the animal, the anatomy. It's, you put that animal through so much suffering and eventually after 4 months you put it down. It's just maybe not humanely right to actually, put that animal through there. Whereas if you phone me and go, listen, this rhino was sleeping, it was shot through the lower limb, just above the foot. It's really limping badly. Can you come out? We would go out. If it's far, we would fly. If it's within, let's say, 6 to 8 hours, we would drive. We have a very good X-ray machine that I can take X-rays in the middle of nowhere. So it doesn't need power or anything, electricity. We can shoot an X-ray there and go, oh gosh, shoot, this is really bad. This is not good. Probably best put this animal down. Or no, guys, this looks bad, but you know what? We've treated 5 like these before. We can cast this rhino. It can actually come right. It will take 2 months, 2 to 3 months, but it will come right. Even if we just also leave it in the field, in the bush. Initially, John, what we decided to do, when we just started, we thought, let's build a kind of a hospital and transport all these animals to this hospital, to a central area where you have diplomas and you have the hospital and you can treat all these animals there, all right? We quickly saw that was not possible, and it was actually a bad idea. Rhino, especially white rhino, do not take well when you put them in a boma. Okay, about 30-40% of them just stop eating for no apparent reason. And after 5-6 days, of not eating, you have to open the gate. Otherwise, they'll just never eat. So we just made the decision that if anybody phones us, whether they're in Angola, whether they're in Mozambique, Botswana, we also travel to Borneo to work on a Sumatra rhino. It's really important to treat, this animal in its natural environment. It feels safest in its natural environment. It knows where the water is. It knows where the food is. It knows where the whole properties, what other animals are there. There's no foreign sounds and stuff because, we thought of building it close to the city. You'll have people and cars and aeroplanes going over. And it'll just stress these animals out of their minds. Plus, you have to transport them, at least 5, 6, 7 hours by road, one way, which in itself has got its massive problems as well. Okay, so it's just better when I get a call, I evaluate, I ask the guy either for a video or some photographs. I go, this looks pretty good that I think we can treat it. I'll bring my X-ray machine or my ultrasound machine. We'll fly there or we'll drive there. When we get there, early in the morning when it's still cool, we would like you to, the attending vet to dart the animal because it's probably compromised as well. Take X-rays or evaluate it and then treat it right there. Whether that normally takes probably half an hour to an hour, hour and a half, which they do pretty well under immobilization for that a period of time, and then wake them up in their natural environment. One thing that is, and then we can go back after a week or after a month or so. There's, for instance, a black rhino in Kruger National Park that had a terrific back leg wound at the bottom, which we treated for a year and a half every single month. We immobilized her, we took off the cast, we treated the wound, and we put on an extra cast then again. it's always a two-edged sword, because without the cast, she was really sore, so she wouldn't use the leg properly. And she would, she won't stop eating, but she would eat less. Once the cast is on, she would eat properly, but she would, the cast would work so well in this black rhino that she would use the limb 100%, which is not exactly what you want, because, by her using the cast, she obviously walks through it much quicker than if she would just not use it that much. So how do you actually get this animal to, for us to apply a cast and to say to her, listen, please just, don't use that leg that often, because you're going to walk through it in 4 weeks' time. And we would really love this cast to stay on for 6 weeks minimum. So that was, she in herself, her name was Goose. She in herself taught us so much about casting rhino limbs. Initially, we just cast, like you would do a horse, and it would last a week. And I go, guys, we cannot immobilize this animal every week. So then you put the thicker cast on. Okay, that lasted 2 weeks. Okay, brilliant. Well, 2 weeks, we would really like to aim for 4 weeks. So then I said, okay, let's cast it again like we did, but let's put a piece of elephant leather at the bottom. So that would just provide one more surface for it to walk through. That lasted 3 weeks. So I said, okay, guys, gee whiz, you're giving us a lot of trouble. So eventually what we did is we would cast it, put one layer of elephant skin at the bottom, cast over that, and put another layer of elephant skin on. And that normally lasted maximum of 4.5 weeks. But we just couldn't get up to 5 weeks with her. And, it just, again, it shows you the real challenges that you have with a wild animal, a wild, heavy animal that weighs a ton, that you cannot confine to a stable like a horse and say, right, we're going to cast you. You're going to just stand here. We're going to feed you every day for the next 6 weeks. And in 6 weeks' time, we will take off this cast. It just doesn't work that way. I've decided probably 6-7 years ago that if you treat a wild animal, or if you put anything onto a wild animal, you must do the strongest you possibly can. Don't compromise, because they're going to phone you after either an hour, which has happened to me, or after 2 days and go, Doc, that thing that you put on, it's off. And you go, no, guys, no, and often it becomes expensive, John, because if it's, for instance, a wild rhino that lives in the bush, you must get a helicopter. You must get everyone there, vehicles. So it becomes an expensive operation. So if you don't do it properly and it lasts at least 2-3 weeks, then, people start getting a bit unhappy, and because they have to re-immobilize and cost money and so on. So you do it the strongest you possibly can. Because I think we underestimate the strength of these animals.
It sounds like the recurring theme is it's a constant learning process too. And just thinking back, I read Dr. Ian Player's book, The White Rhino Saga. A lot of their experiences with darting the rhinos and trying to figure out the right medications. And I think they spoke a lot to the BOMAs and the transportation and losing a lot of rhinos in that way as well.
It's actually funny you should say that, because I think everyone that works, for instance, with wildlife, especially with rhino nowadays, I think we are so blessed and so privileged to be able to have really, really good drugs, at hand, to, in most of the times, safely immobilize black and white rhino and a lot of other species. I think we've got the utmost respect for our colleagues, even 20-30 years ago, what to say, 50 years ago, that immobilized these animals with so few drugs that were available to them, and they succeeded. Maybe they they lost a couple of rhino, but the groundbreaking work they did with, what was available to them against what is now available to us, it's just unbelievable. So yeah, those guys did exceptionally well.
Do you have anyone else that inspires you or has been kind of a mentor or inspiration to your work over the years?
I think we are very privileged to have very, very good wildlife vets in this country. People like Peter Rogers of the Lowveld near Kruger. I think of people like Dr. Dave Cooper, which has been many, many years in Isabella, KwaZulu-Natal, Parks Board. Even of my closest friends like Louis Greef. Louis Greef was actually one of my students at varsity, and he's just, excelled in the wildlife industry. Closer friends like Mani du Plessis and even, people like Doug Grobler, Andre Ace. Those guys are exceptional wildlife vets. And so we're really, really fortunate in this country to have many, many exceptional wildlife vets. We have one guy now that is, doesn't stay far from us, that is making input into the wildlife industry, especially with regards to drugs. So, that is actually, that's another guy that in a couple of years, we got to remember him. He's actually called Hendrik Hansen, that has made a lot of movement into the use of wildlife drugs in all wildlife.
Speaking of all the people that you've been working with, what's, the film Rhino Man, a lot of the story is following these rangers and the work that they do. Kind of going back to your dad, you said, he was a game ranger, and with your current work, I'm sure you encounter a lot of these rangers. What are your thoughts on the work that the rangers are doing out there and your connection to them?
Yeah, John, I think, I've always said, and let's just stay with the rhino issue at the moment. We put drones up and we have massive fences. I work in a property in Limpopo which actually have 3 fences, John, each after the other one. And they're not Mickey Mouse fences, they're proper fences. And about 6 weeks ago, we lost to rhino. So the drones are not going to keep people out. Fences are not going to keep people out. At the end of the day, I think we will win or lose this battle on what we call feet on the ground. And the feet on the ground is no one else but the rangers. They're night and day patrolling, following up spoor of, intruders. If there's any contact, they put their life on the line. Every day they either walk in the blistering heat or it's early morning when it's really cold. They don't drink, they don't eat properly. They're away from their families. So these, to me, yeah, you can say, Johan Marais and Saving the Survivors, they saved so many rhino. They've probably saved over 100 rhino, blah blah blah. But these guys, to me, are really the real heroes of this battle. That's out in the field every single day and really putting their lives on the line, because we have lost, rangers and protecting our rhino. If they're not there, I think our numbers would have been much, much worse by now. And they're also the people that have the connections, that have the in with the local communities in the surrounding area. They have the contacts. They talk to people. They get the tip-offs. There's people coming in tonight, and they're going to probably cross in that area there. So these are really the unsung heroes, I think, in this tremendous battle that we're actually currently fighting. It's sad, to give you an idea, when I was in Kruger visiting a ranger probably 3-4 years ago, So I pitch up at his house 12 o'clock in the morning. And I knock, and his wife opens, and I go, well, where's Mr. X? And she says, no, he's not here, he's sleeping. And, the first thing that goes through my mind, sleeping, 12 o'clock in the morning, he's a ranger. And she goes, no, he was out all night because they got info that, guys are going to cross at a certain place. So they were lying in ambush the entire night, waiting for these people. So we just got talking. And what was really an eye-opener for me, John, what she eventually said to me, she said, you know what? He's not enjoying this anymore. I went, why not? She says, you know what? He signed up and his love in life was to be a ranger. She says, he's not a ranger anymore. He's a soldier now. And I had to think about that. And I thought, wow, that's actually true, John. This guy is not a ranger anymore, because that's all he does, or all they do from morning until night and night until morning, is they fight a battle to keep our rhinos safe. So they've become bush shell soldiers. They're not doing the normal ranger stuff anymore, which is exceedingly sad, because that was, that's what they should do, and that's what they were trained for. So that was quite an eye-opener for me, and I think there's a lot of people that feel like that. Some of the rangers. I mean, you people will probably know better, because I think you guys interviewed more of them. But yeah, that's actually not good. And I honestly hope, I cannot see the end of this problem yet, but I honestly hope that we can have an end to this problem as soon as possible. For both the rhino's sake, but also for people's sake. Because I think, and I'm so glad that you guys are doing the Rhino Man movie, because, always, and whether you go to social media, often you go to, movies like Struer, newspapers, all those things. Yes, it's really bad to see, again, a rhino being shot, again, the face being hacked off. And, we all kind of focus on that. And I do that myself. But we often forget the human interaction around this rhino. And now I'm talking about the owner, the owner's children, possibly, that raised this rhino from a baby year old, because it was an orphan. And now at 5 years old, it was shot. And now they have to stand next to this shot rhino whose horn has been hacked off. I'm talking about the anti-poaching guys. I'm talking about the helicopter pilots. I'm talking about veterinarians. So it's this whole conglomerate of people around the rhino, which I think often we forget, but which has a massive emotional impact on all of these people, which we tend to forget. I know specifically of several wildlife veterinarians that work with rhino that suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. But nobody talks about it. It's just, well, you're the vet, yeah. I mean, you're a wildlife vet, you're a big man, yeah. You must handle it, blah, blah, blah. It's not on, actually. We need to look, yes, we need to look at the rhino issue, but we do need to look at the human issue as well that actually comes with it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially with something it's been such a long period of time that people have been fighting this battle. And yeah, we've talked to a lot of rangers, and Anton Zimba from the Timbavati, he's the main ranger we follow in the story, and I've had a lot of conversations with him too. And yeah, I think especially with the older generation of rangers, you kind of see, they have a lot of this history of what they did before they kind of became more militarized. But the younger generation, some of them have just gone straight into that role of fighting a battle, so they're kind of disconnected from maybe that stronger sense of what it means to be a ranger, or wider connection to the environment around them, because it's like you said, there's just so much, there's constant incursions and intel and all this stuff going on, and yeah, from a post like PTSD standpoint, I can imagine how many people suffer from that in the industry. Even just talking to Anton, he always says for him, every time they hear a rhino shot, it's like losing one of your own. It still hits them
Yeah.
pretty hard, even though it's been going on for so many years. But maybe you can speak to it a little bit from your side. I know you said you got out of treating dogs because of the emotional attachment, but what's it like when you see these rhinos after so long? I mean, these are pretty brutal wounds too that you're experiencing.
Yeah, I must say I don't handle it well. I think emotionally to me, it's still really, really difficult to actually treat these rhino. Even if it's just something stupid like a gunshot wound, and I don't know if it's just me, but to see a 1.5, 2 ton animal lie there and it cannot walk if when you wake it up, it uses its head as a crutch. And then maybe on top of it, it's only got 3/4 of its face. I must say I do not handle it well. I still get emotionally really affected, by it. And I know, initially I thought, gee, Johan, you're a real sissy, you cry with all these things. And then I spoke to other guys, real older guys than me, and real good wildlife vets that's been in the industry for a long time. And I realized, but gee, it's not only me; it also affects them, even worse than me.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, people said to me, Johan, don't worry, it'll get better. But to me, it's not getting better. It's almost like it's getting worse for me. Like every single run I go to, which again has been maimed or shot, it almost gets worse to me. Every time I see this, and I go, it's another rhino. So it's another life we're potentially losing. So our numbers are down again. But it's not even numbers for me. It's just to see this huge, iconic, massive 2-ton animal that's now not able to walk. And it can't really fend for itself. It's not like a dog that we can just leave there and you can bring it some food and water. It has to walk, and it has to graze, and it has to find water because it's a wild animal. The moment I approach this wild animal that cannot stand on all four legs, it wants to kill me or it wants to run away. So it's not like a dog that I can kind of treat and look after. So emotionally, I think it really gets to me badly. To sketch you, for instance, a picture that I was told a while ago, which actually happened, which I also didn't realize 100%, John, is, you're in this reserve. So there's rhino there. So there's obviously anti-poaching people. They hear a gunshot wound. A gunshot goes off. So the radio comes in, they go, no, we have contact. There's people in Block A, for instance. Right? So, these anti-poaching unit jumps in the helicopter. Everyone's fired up. It's poachers again. We hate them. We're going to shoot them. Because they're killing our rhino. They actually killing our African heritage. So they fly there and they see them. And, these poachers, shoot at the helicopter. So you have to defend yourself. So they shoot back and they hit a guy. And the others go, okay, that's fine. Yeah, we will surrender. Right. So there's all this emotion I've gone to. We want to kill you, because you have shot at us. We're defending ourselves, blah, blah, blah. So you land and you walk to the guy. And there the guy lies on the ground and his entire lower jaw has been shot off. It's gone. It's just blood and a mess. So a minute ago, you wanted to kill this guy. You had all the emotion in you that you really want to kill this person, and you will. A minute later, you must save his life. I mean, John, this is just not normal. This is not normal for people to go through that. And I think the emotions that go through these people and the helicopter pilots and the vets and the owners and their children. Yeah, I don't even know if we can describe it, but it's massive and chaotic, I think. And hopefully, we get a silver bullet and we stop this ASAP. But we just cannot continue with this for another 13 years.
Yeah. Is there anything that you do to try and help curb all that emotion that comes up?
I don't. I'm this conservative Afrikaner boykie that were raised up that says, cowboys don't cry. You're not a sissy. You know what's wrong with you when you cry. Obviously there's something wrong with you because you're a man and now you're crying. So I have thought about, going to see, somebody and, then you go, I'm not mad.
Mm-hmm.
Which is actually the wrong way. I mean, that doesn't mean you're mad or crazy if you're going to see somebody. And I think a lot of us are like that, us men.
Yeah.
We must, cowboys don't cry. We're raised like that. But it's wrong, I think. I think it does affect me every now and then. And I thought that, to be honest with you, I have thought about it quite often, to actually go and see somebody. But it's I think, and I don't know if it's like that for other people as well. I think if I can talk to, somebody that I know and explain, listen, this is my issue, this is how I feel, blah, 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 then I'll probably do it.
Yeah.
But to go to this complete stranger that look at you, that doesn't have a clue what I do, where I work, how I hang out of a helicopter to dart rhino, what graphic pictures I see, to try and relay that to a completely unknown person, it's really difficult for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the reason why I haven't gone to somebody.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a similar experience to a lot of people that are going through this. And it sounds a lot like people that are in war, war veterans. I mean, it's very similar experience in a lot of ways.
Very similar.
And yeah, it's probably hard to find that person. I mean, I've never had any experiences like that, like you've experienced. I've seen a couple of poached rhinos while I was there, but not in such a visceral way, especially with rhinos that are still alive and having to treat them. But yeah, and I've actually, speaking from my experience, I've had a lot of therapists over the years here and there that I've tried myself, and I never really found anyone I liked until recently. I actually found it is kind of finding that right person that you connect with, I think, and sometimes you just have to do trial and error, I think, because I've gone to a lot of people and I was like, I don't know if this is for me. It just never works. But now I've got someone that actually, it's just more like talk therapy, and I feel like there's not really a prescription I'm given at the end, but I kind of just process things out loud with another person. Does seem to help. So, and I feel like, I mean, worldwide, it's not just you and there. I feel like there is, especially for men, that stigma of, you talking to someone or going to a therapist or something like that, you should be tough and, yeah, you looked at as like crazy or something like that. But I think the more people that can find help that way and talk about it, the better. So I really appreciate you just being open about that as well, and your experience with that. Yeah.
And there's a stigma, and it's wrong. And we have lots of stigmas in the world currently. It's like HIV and men don't cry, and etc. etc. And we're all human. I mean, there's no difference really. We all put here to actually help each other, to assist each other, and to be kind to each other, and to be kind to the environment and animals.
Yeah.
And why we do these stigmas, it's just wrong, and it's awful, to actually be like that to people. And I've learned a lot. I was quite different, I suppose. When I was younger, I was much more aggressive, and I'm 54 now, and I think I think with age comes, probably more patience, and you calm down about things, and you just realize that, man, all these small things we sweat, it's just not worth it. And, just be kind to each one, to one another, and don't judge so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Because you do not know what that other person has been through the last year, last 5 years, last 10 years, unless you've walked in his or her shoes, which you haven't.
Mm-hmm.
So by just looking at a person and judging, and I still do that, it's so wrong, eh? And I've burned my fingers properly by just looking at a person and judging the cover by its book. The book by its cover. And now I've learned, man, just keep quiet. You can think what you want to, but you just don't say it. Let's just walk with this guy in his boots and on my boots for a mile, and then we can talk again. Because then often you go, oh, really? Man, I would have put my foot in my mouth if I said something a mile ago.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad I kept my mouth shut, because now I understand things much better. And I just wish we would all be more like that.
Yeah, we're all humans. I guess it's easy to react. And yeah, you're right. The more you can kind of give people the benefit of the doubt, and we don't know their history and what they've gone through, and even just not having sleep, you can have a bad day. So doesn't take much to throw a human off. But maybe to wrap up a little bit on the rhino side, as we're getting close to an end here, can you talk? You mentioned maybe we could come back to some of the numbers, but with Kruger Park specifically, I've seen a lot of the stats, and the rhinos per year are going down, but I've also seen, I think, a recent article that's saying the percentage of rhinos being poached every year is actually going up a little bit, just because there's so few now. So I don't know if you have a little bit more on the numbers.
Yeah, so I was and am quite upset with these stats coming out, John, because they do refer to numbers all the time, and I think it's wrong. As you say, we should be releasing stats that gives us a percentage of the available rhino population. Then we'll all go, oh, hallelujah, these numbers are going up, or damn, these numbers are going down, and they're still going down. So to give you an example, in 2008, Kruger had approximately 10,500 white rhino. They did a census in 2019. It was down to 3,500, which is a massive drop. And in 2020, they had another census, and it's down to 2,600. So between 2019 and 2020, they lost, according to their annual report, they lost 900 rhino, correct? White rhino. However, if you look at the numbers they release in that time period, in that year, it's not 900. It's, for instance, 400. So where's the other 500? Mm-hmm. Okay, so those are the questions. I don't know.
Yeah.
But those are the questions that are, for instance, being asked. Kruger is a massive place, but we know that the main population of rhino is really in a triangle in the south below Skukuza. Okay, there's very few rhino north of that. In Kruger's own words, part of the problem is what we call the fifth element, the enemy within.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of corruption within the ranks, be it the guy that does the procurement, be it the ranger, be it the guy that cleans the houses, be it the guy that's just the driver, whatever. And I think that is probably one of the biggest problems one could have, is the enemy within. So it's a guy that looks proper, that behaves proper, but that's actually your enemy, and that you trust implicitly because he works for the organization, but he or her is actually the enemy, and you don't know it. And other people don't know it. So we share info and we share stuff about RHINO and about procedures and policies because we trust everyone. And it's just that one person then goes away from there and it's being shared with other people. So I think that's a massive problem within Kruger at the moment. And it's not to say it only happens in Kruger, John. It also happens in private game reserves as well and on private properties as well. So, Kruger's not the only one. And again, it comes back to the age-old thing about money and greed. So that's what's driving this entire problem. We know that initially in 2008, when it started, it was a health issue. So people used rhino horn for hangover, for HIV, for cancer, for those kind of things. We know it has shifted dramatically, so it's now a wealth issue. All right, so the health is probably 15-20%, but the wealth is no issue. They now use it as a wealth symbol. So whether you're gonna poison the horn or put anything into the horn, it actually makes no difference to these people because they're not using it, they're not consuming it anymore.
It's a display item.
They use it as a display item, it's a libation cup, it's a teapot, it's a wedding ring, okay? It's people give it as gifts, so they don't smell it or drink it or whatever anymore. So that is a massive issue, and I'm not sure how we're going to stop that. There's been several studies done in the last few years, including by Wild Aid, where they've looked at what age, are actually buying rhino horn, which age group, which is it poor people, is it young, medium income, is it rich people, and it was really upsetting to see that all these trends are actually just going up. So we worked with a private investigator that went to China for about 3 years, 4 times a year, and he had one of these undercover cameras. And the footage he came back, John, when he showed me that, I actually wanted to, and I'm completely honest with you, I wanted to close Savings Safaris, sell everything, go to an island in the Indian Ocean, take a plastic pot plant, because I don't even want to look after that, and just become a beach bum. Because with all the money and resources and time we've put in, and this was recent, and put in over the last 12, 13 years to see how this industry is still, irrespective of that, still thriving in the East. And you go, guys, are we really making a difference with everything that we do, on this side? So, the one guy said to him, he said, well, I buy rhino horn, and I say I have people in Africa that, that shoot rhino, and I tell them, when he sees a rhino, you must shoot it, whether it has a horn or not. And this guy went, gee whiz, Mr. Y, if it hasn't got a horn, how will you benefit from shooting the rhino? And he said, well, it's easy. He says, I have a stash of rhino, obviously. Let's say, argument's sake, 5 kilos. Almost 5 kilos. So let's say I have 80 kilos or more. Okay, it's supply and demand. So the less rhino there are on this planet, the more my stash is worth in money, obviously, because it's supply and demand. Mm-hmm. So he says, I would like to see as few rhino as possible and possibly extinct, because the day the rhino goes extinct, this stash of mine goes absolutely through the roof. And I had to think about that for a while, John, and I thought, wow, if they think like that in the East, we are in serious, serious trouble. What do we do as Westerners or as South Africans or as Africans? What do we do to counteract that?
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't answer myself. Apart from, spending more money, putting more boots on the ground, how are we going to just stop these guys at some point and go, okay, guys, now you have enough. Enough is enough now. Now we've only got, let's say, a 2,000 white rhino left. Okay, let's just breed them up again to 10,000, and then you can start poaching again. Let's make a deal here, please. But he's obviously not going to think like that because he wants all gone. He's not interested in buying more. He has enough. He just wants them all gone. So that to me is very, very worrying. Very worrying, I must say. And I'm not the only guy that thinks like that, John. There are several people within the wildlife industry, that are much more deeper than me in connected to rhino and actually in the rhino industry. And they are seriously, seriously concerned about, again, where we are in February 2022. Things are not looking up. And it's not in the news anymore. I don't know about the States or Europe or England, but in South Africa, rhino poaching is by far doesn't reach social media or the news anymore. It's just not newsworthy. So we live under the impression, and if I say we, a lot of South Africans, that, it's not being reported anymore. So it's obviously going better. Our rhino is obviously doing much better. Otherwise, if it's not, surely the news would have reported it. But it's just not newsworthy, and we're actually much worse.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, and the news, they'll focus on one thing for a minute and then they leave it behind, whether it's solved or not, and move on to the next thing. And yeah, it's hard to say what the solution is. I've talked to a lot of people, and this is definitely one of the topics that comes up where, the less rhinos, the higher the demand and the higher the price. And these guys at the top of these syndicates and that are selling this rhino horn, that's what they desire. And maybe one way to get to people is, I hope that most people that maybe buy this rhino horn maybe they're just not attached to the reality of what's going on to the rhinos, and that's part of it. So maybe there could be some change there. But yeah, it's definitely a difficult, complex situation. I mean, from your perspective, after talking about this situation from multiple angles, what do you think? I know there's no silver bullet, but at least in the short-term future, what are your thoughts on how we continue to try and solve this issue?
Hi, John, and I'm actually glad you're asking, because I wanted to mention it just now, but I thought I'll leave it. And I sincerely hope people don't crucify me for this, but I think we're at the stage where, we'll have to make a decision. What do we value more? And if we make the decision and it's rhino, then we stand by it. If it's people, then we stand by it. But, we've, as a collective, have then made the decision, and then we live by it. And all the generations that comes after us, then they just have to live by it as well. So the solution to a certain extent, I've seen in East Africa, especially in Kenya. It's not to say it's the silver bullet, but to a large extent, Richard Leakey, that has unfortunately passed away recently, have shown that it works in the 80s when there were massive elephant poaching happening in Kenya. And what he said is, you shoot on sight. You don't ask questions. You don't wound the guy. You don't ask him, why is he walking here? You shoot on sight. This is a national reserve, or it's a private game reserve. If They catch you on foot in that reserve. They take their gun out and they shoot to kill. And that seems to make a difference. Okay. Whether it's the right thing to do with regards to human rights, etc., I don't know. But I think in the long run, or even in the short run, I think that will assist a lot of reserves in protecting the rhino much, much better. And they currently do it in Kenya, and they have very, very few poachings. To give you an idea, I can send you to a specific ranger in Kruger National Park that has caught the same poacher 3 times inside the park. They're actually on 4 names with each other now. They go, hey, John. He says, you are? You again. Hey, my friend, I've caught you. This is the 3rd time I'm catching you. I'm hungry, man. So, it's, what message do we send? It's okay, So he gets slapped on the wrist. He maybe gets 100 Rand fine or a 200 Rand fine. In a week, he's back. Why would he not be? And I think what people don't understand, it's not the hungry people, John, that's poaching. Of 100 people, there's maybe 5, maybe 5 that's hungry that poach. And they don't shoot rhino, John. They set snares to catch impala, buffalo, and zebra. They don't poach rhino. The guys that come in, normally 3 guys. The one guy will carry water, one guy will carry the gun, and one guy will carry the food. All right? They're there specifically to hunt and to poach rhino with the explicit view of selling the horn for a massive amount of money, but they're definitely not hungry. Okay? So in my mind, it will have to become a shoot on sight policy. And I think that's the only thing that will stem this tide in South Africa and in Southern Africa.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like the risk to reward ratio isn't efficient right now to stop it. So whether that's shoot to kill or a combination of other things, there's got to be severe penalties to stop someone from, getting a horn that could potentially give them years of income in one go. A small penalty, even if it's a small amount of time in prison or a small fine, like you said, it doesn't really deter them from coming back again. And 3 times sounds like not that many compared to what some rangers have said, the amount of times that they've caught the same poachers over and over. I mean, I think I've heard 10, 12, 13 times before they finally get put away. And even from a legal side, there's just not enough there to put these guys away based on these crimes. So,
I mean, I would go the same. I do photography of elephants on foot. So it's a risk reward. So I want to get the best picture I possibly can of a big tusker elephant as close as possible. But at some stage, walking and to this elephant, I go, the risk is now. When I'm here, if I take another step, the risk is just too big. Because this elephant, if he turns and he runs, he's going to kill me. So I'll rather back. And I promise you the same thing will happen, with humans.
Do you have a final message to give anyone, whether that's, any message of hope or any message just in general for people that don't understand the situation and they're just kind of listening in for the first time on this cause?
Yeah, I just think, it sounds all doom and gloom, which it obviously is not. But in reality, people have to understand there's still a massive issue. And we're still losing a lot of rhino, a lot of pangolin, and some other species as well, in the world today. And, it doesn't matter what we're losing, whether it's in Africa, I think whether it's in North America, South America, whether it's in Europe, because, I promise you there's issues in Europe and Asia as well. You cannot just sit back and think, somebody else is going to do something. Even if you just do something small, just stand up and do something. Find out what you can do. Even if you give $1 or $5, just do something to help first of all, the environment and our wildlife. And don't leave it for the person next door. Talk to them as well, get them there as well. But just stand up and do something. Because if we're not going to start and do something, it's going to bite us in the backside. We need the environment, obviously, and we need the animals. And it's under threat globally, not just in Africa, John, not just here with us. So please get up and just, join a group or just stand up and do something. Even if it's a small thing, a lot of people go, yeah, but, it's just such small, and I don't really feel I'll make a difference. But, if 20 people do that, it's already a big difference that you make. So just get up and do something, please, because it will make a difference and it will help your children enjoy the wildlife and the environment when you long gone.
Absolutely. And connected to that, how can people follow your work as you continue to do it and support saving the survivors?
Oh, well, we have Facebook, there's Instagram. I think Facebook is, Saving the Survivors, and Instagram is Save Survivors. They can just click and join and, see what we do and also get involved. And we really hope to make an impact and a difference in the next 5 to 10 years to come. And I think we're also looking forward to the movie called The Rhino Man.
Yeah, we're very close, and we're excited to share it with you and the rest of the world as well, and hopefully have a little bit of impact with it.
I think you will have impact. It's if you write something, it probably doesn't have that much impact. If you have a photograph, it makes an impact. If you have a movie, it makes a much bigger impact.
Yeah, we're hoping. Yeah, thank you for spending so much time with me today and being so open about your experiences and your thoughts. And yeah, I really appreciate your time.
No problem. It's a pleasure. And we look forward to the movie.
Thank you for listening to the Rhino Man podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you're excited to see the film succeed, please subscribe and review our podcast on Spotify and iTunes. Then follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Rhino Man the Movie. More details about Rhino Man, the social impact campaign, and future screenings are at rhinomanthemovie.org. To learn more about the Global Conservation Corps and their work, visit globalconservationcorps.org. Sign up for the newsletter and follow GCC on all of the social platforms. If you like this podcast, make sure to subscribe and catch up on GCC's Voices of Nature podcast, where Bob Ludke interviews a wide range of people who have dedicated their lives to making a difference in conservation. A special thanks goes out to Simone Wilson for the music for this podcast. He's the brilliant composer for Rhino Man the Movie. Learn more about his work at simonewilsonmusic.com. Until next time, I'm John Jerko, and this is the Rhino Man Podcast.